In this episode, we talk about how the Ottawa Senators organization has been dealing, or not so much dealing, with the COVID-19 problems. Alexander Ovechkin still finding new ways to score for the Washington Capitals, and dig into finding who Rem Pitlick is on the Minnesota Wild. Hit the music. Sports Hockey. I'm your host, Peterborough Jaromir, and the mic is always on. It's your one-stop weekly shop for expert analysis on every single team. We are a fun hockey community, bringing everyone together. You can find me on Twitter now at pbojarinov, Bojarinov. V is in Victor, formerly at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. That's Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag at Jablam Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on those three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with 3 hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, www.jablamsports.com, for our podcasts and even game notes for each episode. You'll get all the links to everything we mentioned on this show, including guests. We've even got articles this year and much more content weekly. For our podcasts, click on podcasts on our website and then hockey on this show specifically, right on our website. Time for this week's Trending Now. Joining to discuss what is trending and what everybody's talking about are Scott Cullen. He covers the Toronto Maple Leafs for Toronto Hockey Now and also writes on hockey prospects and fantasy for The Athletic and McKeen's Hockey. You can find him, Scott, on Twitter at @ScottCullen. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And of course, my old pal DB joined the show again. You can find him, of course, on Sirius XM NHL Network, and of course on Kings of the Podcast, covering the LA Kings. You can find him on Twitter at DennisTFP. DB, what's up?
Oh, good, Peter. Just back from Canada. Survived the all the protocols to get in the country and get back out. So great to be with you again.
How'd you enjoy Canada? It's been a long time, right?
It's been over 2 years. Well, actually, I was in Edmonton for the Cup final.
The bubble.
That wasn't even like being in Canada, to be frank. I got quarantined for 14 days. I was in an empty arena. To go to Scotiabank and to go to Bell Center in front of capacity crowds was just amazing, wonderful, and just a reminder of how great this game is in Canada. So I was happy to come up and see a couple of Kings games, and they actually won. So it was a good luck charm for them for at least a couple of games.
Yeah. And describe how amazing those hot dogs are, apparently, in the Bell Center.
Yeah, there's a debate. So they're hot dogs, but they're like on a slice of bread, and they taste real because they're light. They're not big, heavy hot dogs, and they're legendary at Bell Center in the press room. So I had to have one. I had to take a picture, put it on Twitter, and then of course there's a debate about the hot dog, and it wasn't fully on the bun, and is hot dog a sandwich, which conversation. So. But it was just like great to be back and be around all the history of the Bell Center in front of a capacity crowd. So it was a lot of fun. So those hot dogs are unique, and I enjoy them, but they're not for everyone.
All right, let's get to the trending now. Of course, anybody listening on the YouTube or on any of the podcasts out there, Spotify or whatever, you can go to jablamsports.com/season 7, episode 7 already. Wow. So on Saturday, I'm going to be talking about Saturday all episode here. Minnesota Wild continued their hot play so far this season. But who in the blue is Minnesota Wild's hat-trick scorer, Rem Pitlick? Anybody know, Scott?
Well, I mean, what I know of Rem Pitlick is he was a Predators prospect who they put on waivers and because he's from Minnesota, there was no chance he was getting past the Wild on waivers. And I mean, it's simplistic to say that, but I mean, there is kind of a thing with people like with players from Minnesota and the Wild that they'll just they will give them, if you're going to get one last chance, the Wild will give it to you. And so Pitlick, I mean, he'd been reasonably productive in the American Hockey League, so it's not inconceivable that he could kind of carve out an NHL spot. Now, to score his first 3 goals of his career all in one game, maybe that's a little bit unusual, but I think he's at least getting a fair chance here in Minnesota.
Hey, Parise is getting a second last chance, I guess, with the Islanders. DB, just unbelievable that the Wild just keep on finding these amazing things, like Kaprizov, obviously. Now he's making the big bucks, but now Rem.
Yeah, well, look, their core is really good. The organization, it's I could keep going back to Kaprizov. That's one guy. Remember, that was a boring average team with him. And one player galvanizes an organization. If I'm Pitlick, I'm taking those 3 pucks, putting in my trophy case in my man cave, and that's probably going to be the highlight of his career at this point in time. If he does something more than that, that's great. But they have and they're still underrated, right? Because people thought Colorado's going to bounce back. St. Louis is really doing good things. But this team, they're serious. And remember, they gave Vegas, even though Vegas got knocked out by Montreal, give them all they can. They took them to 7 games last year. So it's surprising that Rem Pitlick did it, but it's not surprising in their success, because it's just the body of work is not too big to say this is a flash in the pan. It's a team that can't trend in that direction. It's just a really good team that I think forever is going to be underrated. Probably, Scott, because they do play in Minnesota, so we're going to get the true press again. But well coached, smart team, don't beat themselves, and they have a star player in Kaprizov leading them. Plus, they're still getting in goaltending if they need to win games.
Who was one of the most fascinating players for them this year is Ryan Hartman. A guy who's he's had a decent NHL career to this point, but it kind of came up as an agitator and so on. But like this year, he's a much more dangerous offensive threat. Like he's getting 2 more shots per game than he had last year. And that kind of spike in his offensive production has just made him, a much better player for them. Like he's, he offers a whole lot more than he had previously. And so, he's not ever going to be a star, but I think, when you're trying to find supporting cast behind Kaprizov, a guy like Ryan Hartman's actually, been really helpful for them.
Let's move on to the powerhouse, maybe the best sniper of all time. He's now hit 4th spot, just jumped ahead of Brett, the Golden Brett Hull. 4th in NHL history. It's crazy. The one thing I'm wondering is, everybody, even like 4 years ago, we were like, he's going to slow down. And he is now scoring not from his usual power play spot. He's dominating now and scoring 5-on-5. Why DB is the great 8 playing differently and somehow seemingly even better, and still adapting his play and finding new ways to score at the age of 36.
Well, if they're going to win games at this point, PB, they don't still have Backstrom. He has to do more for them to win. So he's not just going to his office on the power play, like I said. He's doing what's necessary to win, because the guy is a winner, right? Remember his legacy when he couldn't be 87 in the playoffs, and he was never going to do it. Now he did it. Now he's just solely focused on breaking this record, and his team's still good around him. I think that's the key. I think we are being assumptive here that he signed that contract to break the record, without question. The team has to stay good around him, and so far they are. It's a really nice start. I think Scott will agree. I'm not sure about their goaltending. I think that's their fatal flaw. I don't think they're a dangerous team for the playoffs. But he's just doing what's necessary, and necessary is going to different places on the ice, at least this time around, while his guys mend and score goals. But it's not shocking, it's not surprising that he's at the top of the goal leaders board at this point.
Scott, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that he's always throughout his career. I mean, it's every player is hungry to score goals, but not in the way that Ovechkin is, right? And so yes, he loves setting up in the power play spot. But if you tell him, you have to go to the back post, you have to go grab this rebound, you need to tip this in, he's happy to do all of that stuff because it means getting goals. I think he has taken on maybe a bit more responsibility early this season because, the Backstrom injury. I mean, that's huge. Backstrom is a really important player for them. And the fact that Ovechkin has kind of continued to roll, even in Backstrom's absence. I mean, that it also helps that Kuznetsov has had a bounce back season, right? Like there's a lot of responsibility heaped upon Kuznetsov with no Backstrom. You know, when they're all healthy, you kind of go, oh, you got Backstrom, you got Kuznetsov 1-2 down the middle, you're all set. Well, when you take one away, that puts a lot of pressure on Kuznetsov, who's coming off what was a down season. You know, he didn't really have, his best year last year for sure. And so I think, Ovechkin has taken on this responsibility. And really the reason that I expect that he's probably going to catch Gretzky is he never gets hurt. Like, right. It's a stereotype kind of thing. There's a website called Russian Machine Never Breaks, and it's based on Ovechkin, right? Like the guy's missed like 15 games in 11 years or in the last 11 years or something. Like it's, and like, he missed some games last year because of COVID violation, like not even injury. And so I just think that the fact that he has been so durable, it's making it somewhat inevitable that he's going to catch Gretzky, which, I mean, a few years ago that sounded preposterous, but we're kind of the direction we're heading. It doesn't sound so preposterous anymore.
Yeah, DB has called out Kuznetsov in the past. We know that. Like he's like, what is he? What is he? And apparently he is so far this season. Yeah. But we've seen the commercials. We know of the past of him, Ovi, tied in with Backstrom. Apparently he's tighter with Backstrom than his own wife.
That is an awesome commercial. I love it.
That is. It's great. But and look, remember, and talk about Kuznetsov. What was all the chatter in the offseason? They're done with his act. They're going to trade him. Mm-hmm. The COVID thing. Thank goodness they didn't trade him. They would be sunk without him. Yeah. And he's responded. He's stepped up. So sometimes there's two guys like that. And Tarasenko's the same way. He didn't like the way he was treated, the surgeries, all this other stuff. What happened? Like Tarasenko's got 7 goals already, and they're at the top of the division. So sometimes it's the trades that you don't make, PB, that are the better trades.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, the rebounding of the seasons coming up. And sometimes it seems like, are these Russian players playing better because the Olympics is coming up?
They do tend to like playing for their country. We'll give them that. But I mean, look, if you're Ovechkin, I mean, he could have no goals right now and he'd still be playing for them in the Olympics. Like that's a given, right?
Yeah. All right. So, of course, the Hockey Hall of Fame announced their inductees to the 2021, and that's 5 players, 1 builder. Ken Holland, of course, as the builder. Kim St.Pierre, Marian Hossa, Jerome Iginla, Doug Wilson, and Kevin Lowe. DB, you got a story there for me?
Yeah. When Iggy came to Los Angeles, he was at the end, right? I mean, he just traded. Darryl Sutter's here, his presence. But if you go back and remember the elbow that Chucky threw at Drew Doughty, and there was a whole to-do and a whole big to-do about that, Iggy stood up and before the game when there was a beef at center ice, and he went with Derek England. And I remember that. And so here's a guy who hadn't really no connection to the franchise other than Darryl, his old coach. He would stand up for Drew Doughty, who was a star player, and say, hey, look, this isn't gonna linger at this point. And I do remember being in a room and, Iggy never refused, for me, at least a couple of times, a request for an interview, always took the time, was never in a rush. So, you talk about a Hall of Fame player. This is a Hall of Fame person because you hear all the platitudes played towards his player. So to me, it's just the experience, the short time he had in Los Angeles. I get it. I get the reverence. I get, look, he wasn't the star player he was in Calgary, but I get why people talk so highly about this legend of the game, and that's truly what he is, PB.
Jerome he oozes kindness. It just seems like that is who he is, in and out. And when you mention the fighting thing too, it just reminds me of, he's fought a lot of enforcers his entire career where a superstar player would just never do that. It's crazy.
He also had one of the most famous superstar fights ever, right? When he and LeCavalier went in the Cup final. Like you never see guys of that caliber, particularly like those guys were in their prime. And for them to, go in the middle of a Cup final, that was unusual.
Oh my goodness. I always bothers me how different the game changes, even from the first round to later on rounds, and everybody's afraid to do things after. Yeah. They're like, oh, my team's already this far, I'm afraid to do something. But the Leafs aren't, or have to not be too afraid. on Saturday night. Obviously, Morgan Riley pulled out the win with 11 seconds remaining in regulation versus the lowly Buffalo Sabres. But between the pipes was a rookie, Joesph Woll, getting his first NHL start and win. How big was that for Woll, and what is his possible potential, Scott?
Well, I mean, it's great for him to get the win in his NHL debut. I think under perfect circumstances, there is no way he'd be in the NHL right now. If you're the Maple Leafs, Joesph Woll is 23. His track record to this point doesn't say, oh, this guy's NHL ready. And I think their expectation was that he'd play in the American Hockey League all of this year, and then you can kind of reevaluate things. But Peter Mrazek has not been able to stay healthy, and so the Maple Leafs have had to dip into the farm system and see who can make spot starts basically. And they brought up Michael Hutchinson first, and he struggled in his start against San Jose. And so we'll look for someone else. They give Joesph Woll a start, and he played all right. The tough thing for Woll is that the Leafs were pretty sloppy in their own right. Like they gave up some pretty awful opportunities against him. And so now in the post game, Joesph Woll was very complimentary of the team in front of him and all that. And then you talk to all the players, and they were like apologizing for how terrible they were because they gave up some grade A chances to this kid who's making his first start. But all is well that ends well, I think, in that case. But I think overall, the Maple Leafs are basically going to try and get by, and if Joesph Woll ends up getting another start or two while Mrazek is out, so be it. But I think they want to get him to the American Hockey League where he can play, and then you can reevaluate him long term. But I mean, the ideal for the Maple Leafs is to have Campbell and Mrazek available, because right now, Jack Campbell hasn't played more than 31 games in an NHL season, and he's on pace to start like 60 plus, and so that's there's some risk there, and as great as Campbell has been, it's not going to feel great if all of a sudden he gets hurt and he's out long term as well.
DB, you've seen Campbell for many years as well. Yeah. Is he too nice, and is it possible for him to play 60 plus games?
He's not too nice. It's possible, but I think Scott hit the initial point. Mrazek is never healthy. Mm-hmm. Like when they sign him, I'm like, okay, when he's on, he's a streaky goaltender, but he's always hurt. I think that's the key. So, and look, Jack's playing for a contract too, and the comparable to Jack is Cal Peterson here in Los Angeles. That's $5 million for 3 years. He's trying to earn that contract, but it's just, I think this game has changed so much. It's dangerous to have a goalie playing more than 60, 65 games, because if you're going to have an elongated run in the playoffs, that's a lot of games. That's going to be 80 some odd games. And there's no Mika Kiprasov, and Scott knows that name from way back in the day. The guys don't play 72 games in the regular season anymore. It's 60, it's 55, you want 55, maybe 35 or something like that. So to me, he hasn't, and Scott said he hasn't been used a lot, so there's not a lot of tread off the tires. But I think you're really rolling the dice if he gets up in the 60s with respect to that. You need Peter Mrazek healthy. He's not going to be healthy. I think at the deadline, they got to figure out another way to bring in maybe another veteran presence if you can't depend on Mrazek.
That's a good comment there, DB. I always said that sometimes you don't want to overplay your goalie and make sure they're fresh. We saw that with Braden Holtby. The one season when they played him less, he was a little more fresh in the playoffs. And you've seen that a little bit with Jonathan Quick as well. He had more energy, and he was able to kind of have a better second half and run for the playoffs for the Kings, right?
Yeah. And now look at Jonathan Quick. And also they be challenged, right? Cal Peterson was the guy. Todd McCullen told me last week, like, because of his age and his contract, because he got the extension, we want Cal to emerge. But guess what? Jonathan Quick is too prideful, and he said, yeah, you know what? Not yet. I'm not giving up my net yet. So it's just interesting how these goalies bounce back.
Again, you can find them on Twitter at DennisTFP for DB, and for Scott at by Scott Cullen. In our next segment, we'll discuss the Ottawa Senators and how COVID is running rampant in the dressing room. Have you ever wanted a one-stop weekly shop for expert analysis on every single NHL team? Look no further than jablamsports.com. We've had guests from James Cybulski, Ardo Cal, and yes, even Dennis Bernstein shows up monthly. We are a fun hockey community bringing everyone together. Find us wherever you get your podcast and type in JABLAM Sports. That's Jablam Sports. Our website is, yes, you've called it, jablamsports.com. Go download and subscribe right now. You can also find us on socials at Jablam Sports on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm Peter Bojarnov saying, puck you later. For this week's Team ISO, we've got a team that is having a hard time right now with the COVID pandemic. On to discuss on the panel are Graham Nichols. He covers the Ottawa Senators and has written for The Athletic and the Ottawa Citizen. You can find Graham on Twitter at 6thSen. Welcome to the show, Graham.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
As well, back on the show is Ross Levitan. He's been the producer at TSN, and you can listen to him on the Locked On Senators podcast daily. You can find him on Twitter at Ross Levitan. How's it going, Ross?
I'm good. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
It's tough times. Tough times there in Ottawa. We've seen the statement released by the Senators, and of course the PR by the NHL has said that as a result of 10 players currently in NHL's COVID protocol, and with the continued spread in recent days, that they're going to postpone games through at least Saturday, November 20th. And of course, the decision was made by the NHL, PA, and the club's medical groups. Oh my goodness, it's rough. It's really tough right there right now. How bad really is it, Graham?
It's frustrating because I think if you look around social media and you listen to some of the pundits talking about the team right now, I think it's a long time coming. It's something that should have happened a while ago. And you look at the injury situation, like Erik Brannstrom suffered a broken hand while some of these games are being played, and then it's revisionist history. But at the same time, you could say, had the NHL stepped in and done the right thing a little bit earlier on, Erik Brannstrom could still be playing, and he could still have an impact on the game for the team. And I think if you look at his career trajectory and where he's at, I think he has to be frustrated because this was his opportunity to get called up, to showcase what he could do, to prove that he belonged in the NHL and was a part of this team's future. And I think for him and for the players who have to deal with this and their families have to deal with, I think it's got to be really, really frustrating for them.
So they're going to miss the games postponed versus New Jersey, Thursday, Nashville, the Rangers. Ross, was it finally the right move to make? And how much has maybe the organization dropped the ball here?
I don't think the organization's dropped the ball at all. It's nothing that they haven't done. I think the right time here, if I'm looking back and just the dates everybody went on, you mentioned 10 guys plus the associate coach, Jack Capuano. And he went on there with a player, and they were the second and third cases. And then the next day you get 2 more active cases. And I don't know if it's travel at the end of the day, but Ottawa was in Boston on the 9th. And that's where Victor Mete tested positive. At that point, you've got 6 separate guys on the team. And you don't know how many more, because at that point, right, it's, the 5th was Austin Watts, and then you have the 2 cases on the 7th, and then the 8th and the 9th. You're looking at 3 days in a row at that point, and 4 of the last 5 days. To me, it was just a league that acted too late. What's Ottawa going to do? Tell Boston they're not showing up? Tell Calgary and Pittsburgh not to bother coming to Ottawa? It's not their decision. I think this was all in the league, and they have a mandate there. They're trying to make money too, and I think that recouping lost revenue, of course, is going to be at the forefront for the next couple of years. You see that with the flat cap, but how it affects the Senators, this situation is really unfortunate. To build on what Graham said, not only Brannstrom, but what would Shane Pinto's future look like if he had a few extra weeks or days at least to recover from a separated shoulder? He comes back, pops it right out, looks like he's done for the year. Comedy of errors, really unfortunate set of circumstances right now. And ultimately, better late than never, though. They definitely did the right thing here. And now we wait until at least the 22nd here to get them back on the ice.
What are we looking at here? If they do come back, how much of a compressed schedule will it be? And it will be tough to come back from. Graham?
Yeah, I'm not too sure when they're actually going to go about and do it. They haven't announced anything. I think it's going to be tough. Like, They're talking about the Olympic participation as well being in jeopardy, and it really depends. It's a condensed schedule as is, and it's going to be hard to fit these games in. But in Ottawa's case, like just based off their start, like they had a difficult start. They're behind the eight ball a little bit, so I don't think it matters as much for them in terms of repercussions as it would for the teams that they're playing, like Nashville, New York. Like these are meaningful games for those organizations. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fit it in.
Yeah, and Ottawa's in a stretch here where you're playing 15 games in the first 27 days of November. We tweeted out at Sen Central, calm before the storm. Well, it sure has been a storm, but not the one we were expecting now. And with 3 games clear, you look at how that's going to play forward. Their next scheduled game is in Colorado and on a 4-game road trip through California. So that's a long way to go at the best of times. And how are they going to have extra bodies on the trip? Is everything going to be finalized by then? Is the NHL comfortable at postponing more games potentially down the road? There's so many questions right now, Peter, not a whole lot of answers really.
I think one of the curious things that I'm interested in is like a number of players from Belleville were called up. They were affiliated with the organization. They played a couple games with them. What happens to those players? Do they go back down to Belleville? Are they allowed to play? Like, what is going to be the status of those guys?
Yeah, and I mean, you take that a step further. I don't know how they did the whole situation, and yeah, we can get into Zaitsev and technically Batherson wasn't initially put on, but he missed the morning skate on Saturday. Everyone thought he was going to be the 10th guy. He ended up playing, getting 4 points, and then being put on the list the next day. Zaitsev on and off and on again. To me, it was a situation, and we interviewed Alex Formanton for the podcast before the season, and he lives with Victor Mete. So Mete tests positive. Formanton plays in Boston, gets in a fight. He's going toe-to-toe with another team, pretty close contact. And then the next day he's off. So what creates a close contact? Because for me, living with someone would certainly be in that boat. So that's clearly the situation. Not all these guys live in town full year round. So there's situations. I mean, last year, the famous one was Brady Norris and Stutz all living together. So there's easy to transmit throughout. So I think, the best thing to do, especially then, was take a step back and say, let's see how far this is spread initially and go from there. And clearly the NHL had something else that they were pushing, whether it was, again, revenue or just that they didn't think it was going to get as bad as it got. But once it hits double digits, you're looking at a situation where you're starting goalie and 4 of the 6 defensemen on opening night are out of the lineup. And yes, we can argue whether those are 4 of the 6 best defensemen, but they were certainly in DJ Smith's eyes on opening night. And then you're looking at 3 out of your 4 right wingers. Like, this has just deteriorated the depth chart, and a team that didn't really have depth to lose out on at the best of times is now in a situation where you're behind the 8 ball. And they went 77 games without being shut out. It was the longest streak actively at the National Hockey League level. And then they get shut out 2 of their last 3 games. So coincidence maybe, but also definitely didn't help their competitiveness throughout the last handful of games.
The NHL, they don't know what's going on with the organization as much. Ottawa knows who lives with who and who interacts with who. So it's a tough situation on both sides. When we go to the team specifically, and I'm going back to last season, they finished the season 10-4-1. That's a 700 percentage. They started this season so far exactly the opposite. 4-10-1. The opposite of it. 10-4-1, 4-10-1. Outside of everything that they've been going with, what else has them struggling so much or falling off? Because I know I had them pegged to be better. Graham?
Sure, I can start. I think if you just look at the organization as a whole, like they didn't really upgrade themselves in the offseason. They had a very quiet offseason, which is fine. Like they wanted to give every opportunity to their kids and let them play and develop. But to Ross's point earlier, like this team didn't have a lot of depth beyond those young players. So had the injury bug hit them, had this COVID issue struck the team, like their depth was negatively impacted. And you look at the injury to Shane Pinto, that's going to leave a huge hole down the middle. And he was playing well at the beginning of the season, and he was one of their best offensive contributors, although the numbers weren't there just by shots and expected goal metrics. Like this guy was an impactful player when he was on the ice, and to lose him down the middle, I think has just negatively impacted the forward group. And I think Tim Stützle's a guy who should be a beneficiary of playing with Pinto, but ever since Pinto's been out of the lineup, Stützle's kind of just meandered across all the lines. DJ Smith's bouncing him from line to line, and it hasn't really worked out, and his play and production has suffered. And I just think it's a situation where the blue line hasn't been very good, and that's the weakness. I think the goaltending's been okay, but everything starts on the back end for this club, and I think the lack of depth up front is starting to hurt them a little bit.
Graham, isn't it crazy? We're talking about just turned 21-year-old centerman as a real X factor on this team, and Pinto's been just that since the start of last season. And I know maybe I'm pushing just to get a little more range out of this sample size, but without Shane Pinto in the lineup, this team has 15 wins in 54 games. 15 wins in 54 games. They have 12 wins in 16 games with him. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous what the splits are with and without this guy in the lineup. So not saying it's the be all end all, but he is a huge factor. So he goes down, and they lost a few games there. The Rangers one in particular stands out as a game they have to win up 2 goals with 5 minutes left. They lose that one. They lose by 1 goal to the Sharks. I thought that was a winnable game as well on home ice. And if they win those 2, you're looking at a situation where they're, I think, 4-2 at that point in the early part of the season. Instead, they're 2-4, and then the wheels fall off afterwards. So it was really just the whole circumstances of just rolling over, a Rolling Stone gains moss, a dozen game moss, but one that's sitting still. It just covered up, and you start to really see all the problems that this team has. And like Graham said, a lot of it's on the back end. Guys not shoulder checking when the puck's in the corner, that won't check behind them, and they leave guys open in the slot. It's really been a problem. And DJ Smith singled out odd man rushes against them. I didn't really see that as much of an issue. To me, it's just the defensive zone structure of this team, no matter whether they're full health or if they're in this situation they've been in the last 5-6 games. It's really something that I think can be fixed on video. Like, you can see it pretty clearly, and hopefully they can figure it out, because the pieces are there. Like, you have such exciting young players here. There are some guys going through some tough stretches. Josh Norris, I'm sure, would tell you he hasn't played his best hockey over the last 2-3 weeks, but you expect that, a guy who's been kind of thrust into a top line role. So I think you're still looking at a situation where this can be a successful year from the standpoint of development of these young players. But right now it is a big time curveball their way.
One of the things that's kind of concerning to me too is just how I think this season everybody looked at the youth and guys like Stützle, Norris, Pinto. These are the players that everyone was kind of banking on a play. But then you get like a little further. Everybody saw like Igor Sokolov was on the depth chart. I think the concerning part for me is that some of those guys who are like the next tier of young players are a little bit further away from being productive NHL players than many are hoping for, and probably the organization as well, because the depth, I think, in the system is exciting, and it's there and it's present. I think Jake Sanderson's going to get called up at some point, but this might take longer than many people were thinking it would. It might take an extra year before this team starts pushing competitively for a playoff spot. Dude,
I'm glad you brought up Jake Sanderson. I'm heading down to the Ralph next weekend. I'm so fired up. Get a glimpse of Sanderson and the K-Train, Tyler Clevin down there. So that's kind of what's in the Sens fans' back pockets. You look at the defensive structure, or lack thereof, I should say, and then you see Jake Sanderson doing what he's doing at North Dakota. You'll see him wear the C with the U.S. the World Juniors. So the best days of this organization were never going to be this year. It's just unfortunate how it's all kind of unraveled here after such a promising finish to last year.
Let's jump on that Jake Sanderson train. He's the future of the team. A lot of people say that he's probably one of the best defensemen that aren't in the NHL yet today. How soon could he be playing, and where is the limit for Sanderson?
I don't think there's a ceiling on this kid, because whatever roof analysts want to put on him, he busts through it. At first, it was that his skating's so good, but can he defend in front of his net? His gap control is great, but can he defend in front of the net? Proves that. Oh, but his offensive upside doesn't have very many points. Is that going to hinder him long term? Well, now he's got, 15 points in 11 games right now as a sophomore defenseman. The numbers are very comparable at the college level to Cale Makar. And is that a really high comparison? Yeah, Cale Makar is one of the best young defensemen in the league, nominated for the Norris Trophy at 21. I don't know if I'm putting that much expectation on him, but I just see him as a guy who's going to step in the lineup on day one. This guy, I mentioned when we interviewed Pinto, I said, you don't even know where Belleville is, do you? And I would say the same thing about Jake Sanderson. Those guys aren't going to have to worry about the minors. They already play in a pro environment in North Dakota, and their play just matches that. These guys are just groomed to be pros. And I think Jake Sanderson, you're going to see him step in. And I don't think he's going to play 12, 13 minutes ever in a game. I think he steps in and plays 17, 18 minutes in all situations. He's just a reliable defenseman that a coach will love right away. And so long as that doesn't put him up to his neck offensively, I think that he'll slow and steady grow, maybe 15 points in year 1, 20 in year 2, and maybe in the third, fourth, you can top out at maybe a 40, 45-point defenseman. A guy who, I'm not a huge player comparable guy, but Ryan McDonough was a guy who was kind of compared to him. Not the fastest guy, but a great skater, great boxing in front of the net, power play, PK, just an all situations guy. So if he could be that type of defenseman, I think Sens fans would be thrilled.
We can go between the pipes and talk about maybe if this is their problem or not with Matt Murray, two-time Stanley Cup champion, and of course with Anton Forsberg, who Forsberg had a great game that first game versus the Leafs, but we haven't seen any of that magic coming back. Let's go to the future. Philippe Gustafsson is the future. They've already called him on emergency with all this, but he might not still be on the roster come the 20th or in the future. Is the future now, or are they just going to postpone it and wait till things settle down? Graham.
Hey, Graham, did you want them to protect Gus or Dak?
I was a proponent of protecting Gus.
Oh, okay, I was team Dak, so I'll let you take this one for sure.
It's exciting to see Philip Gustafsson get rewarded, right? Because, you know, to Ross's point, like Joey Daccord was the goalie of the future, right? Based off his performance in Belleville, he got called up. He kind of brought that spark and energy. He looked like a gamer, a competitor who just battled in the net and provided that bit of athleticism in the goal that Senators fans just hadn't seen in a while. And, you know, if he doesn't get hurt, Gustafsson, we're not even talking about him. He's not even here. And to see him come in late last season, thrive, build off that, has a great preseason because of his two-way contract, he gets sent to the minors. That's fine. It's just a little speed bump for him, comes back up, and he just builds off what he did last season. He's just calm, poised, athletic. The rebound control is phenomenal. And it's just to see him perform the way he has, despite some of the curveballs that have been thrown his way that are just out of his control in terms of contract status to Matt Murray and Forsberg. It's great to see. And he's thriving. The team looks comfortable playing in front of him, and he's giving them a chance to win. He's giving them a chance to win every game that they're in. And it's exciting to see. In terms of Matt Murray, I think that's the pill that we're going to have to swallow, because he just, even when he has played and played well, he just can't stay healthy and stay on the ice long enough to build on that momentum. It's a little bit frustrating. I'm sure he's probably the most frustrated one in the group.
Well, I think the only reason why Forsberg's still there, it's if they had a third string COVID style last year, it would be a lot easier, but Forsberg needs waivers. He's been claimed, I think, 100 times off of waivers in the last 12 months. I think, back and forth. We don't have to go through each one, but they don't want to lose him on waivers. And if they did, and then Matt Murray gets hurt, which has been a trend in his time in Ottawa, what are you doing now? Now you're on to your fourth, fifth guys, and those are two young kids in Mads Søgaard and Kevin Mandolese that they want to play games in Belleville. So this is a buffer year, and Forsberg's in the last year of his contract. So the way that Pilsy and I set it up before the season, and it has played out that way. We had a bit of a road bump in our take here, but we were happy to see it. We were in the stands there at the home opener. Forsberg was unbelievable, 46 saves. But what they're doing is Forsberg's the backup, whether Murray's healthy or not. And if Murray can't play, Gus goes right in, he plays, and then Forsberg's there for spot duty. So I have no problem with it this year. The strange part about Philip Gustafsson, and I'm all in on him now for sure, but the main reason I was team Joey Dax, and not only because he's a friend of the show, great guy, his game in Belleville was so much better than Gus. I worked for the Belleville Senators and their production team. Pilsy and I would drive down from Toronto for all their home games, and I can't even count the amount of times Gus would let in 2 goals in the first 5 minutes and get pulled. The confidence just wasn't there. And we're looking at a sample size now in 76 games in the minors. He has an .894 save percentage. It's just not there in Belleville, but some goalies, the structure in the minors, it's a little more all over the place. And Gus, he's such a technically sound goalie. His game, strangely enough, translates better to the NHL. And he's playing lights out here. Just to give him some props, because I kind of pulled him down there, .924 save percentage in 16 games. Like, he's just given this team, like Graham said, a chance to win every single night. So I think he deserves to be in goal. And next year he's on a one-way contract. So I think he feels good about that. But this is a bit of a transitional year in between the pipes.
With Joey Daccord, he's on the Kraken now. What do you see? Do you think he still has that potential to be that number one future goaltender for the Kraken then? Because they've put all their marbles in those first two guys. And, of course, bring in Colorado Avalanche's starting goaltender in Grubauer.
Yeah, I think Grubauer is an interesting pickup because by all accounts, it seemed like Colorado's structure really helped him be at the performance that he was at these last couple of years. But to answer your question, I think Dax has that potential. I liked what Graham said. He called him a gamer with athleticism. I just thought that he's the kind of guy that gives your team in front of you confidence. And I love that in a goalie. I think he has a swagger to him. And that's why I would have gone with him. But, hey, the Sens seemed like they made the right decision because Gus has been lights out.
Again, you can find them on Twitter at Ross Levitan for Ross and for Graham at 6Sens. Thank you both for joining me this week.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you to all my guests this week. I enjoyed the fun chat with DB and Scott about how important it is to rest goaltenders during the arduous, long NHL season, as well to Graham and Ross. Wow. I think I was lost by the end of that chat at the depth of their Senators analysis. Fantastic. If you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at PBojaranov or the entire team at Jablam Sports. You can use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. If you want to also contact us on our website, go to jablamsports.com/contact. Also, you can find all our info for all our guests and our podcasts, for even game notes for each episode, including this one. You'll get guests info and links to all the things we mentioned on this show. We even have weekly content articles. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Jablam Sports Hockey is your one-stop weekly shop for every expert analysis on every single team. We are a fun community bringing everyone together. Follow us on Facebook. Thank you, everyone. And to every one of our listeners, we're giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.